Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Joseph Parker has taken to social media to call out Andy Ruiz Jr. for a fight, for a rematch. They fought in 2016, Joseph Parker winning a close decision. So he says, who's keen on this rematch with Andy Destroyer? My team been reaching out, bro. Let's make it happen. Hashtag Parker Ruiz 2. So this is quite interesting for a number of reasons, because right now Joseph Parker is off contract. So recently he's been fighting on DAZN with Matchroom. He's actually the last couple of years been under the Matchroom banner, had a number of fights which have sort of culminated with these last two UK-based pay-per-views with Derek Chisora. That last fight against Chisora, the rematch just a couple of months ago, one of Joseph Parker's most aggressive performances in recent times, where offensively he looked pretty good. But he's now off contract, so Matchroom had, and this is from David Higgins, Joseph Parker's former promoter, current advisor / manager, had said they had up until about 10 days ago to make an offer, re-up for Joseph Parker. But whatever's happened, maybe they didn't like it, because this call out would indicate that maybe things with Matchroom and a potential re-signing aren't going swimmingly. And you have to remember, if Joseph Parker was to re-sign with Matchroom, who are they going to sort of match him with? Because that's kind of a problem. He's already fought Anthony Joshua. He's already fought Dillian Whyte. Whyte and Joshua are off doing other things, and he's probably unlikely to get a rematch with either of those guys, at least for the next year or so. So in the interim, who does he fight? He's already fought the other pay-per-view level guy, Derek Chisora. So what's left? The only sort of thing that I can sort of see that makes sense at Matchroom for Joseph Parker is Dempsey McKean, and that's only in the New Zealand and Australian context. McKean, an Australian heavyweight, Joseph Parker, former WBO champion, a New Zealand heavyweight. Matchroom are looking to expand into Australia, so that could make sense because it would be on pay-per-view in Australia and New Zealand. But apart from that, it's a little bit thin on the ground. People forget that they've actually got rid of a lot of the sort of mid-tier heavyweights, or the heavyweights have just sort of left in the past year or two. Guys like Martin Bakole. You also have Hughie Fury. There's a whole bundle of guys who've actually just left. They're no longer on the Matchroom books. But there has been a desire from Higgins and Parker to potentially fight in the United States. And what could they do for Parker there? Probably not much. Zhang Jilei potentially, probably no money in that fight. If there's no money in the Hrgovic fight, which they turned down, there's no money in the Zhang fight, surely. So reaching out to Andy Ruiz Jr. via social media could be an admission that maybe things aren't going as swimmingly as they could be with Matchroom and a potential re-up. Maybe the offer from Matchroom is just not as much as Joseph Parker wants. He's heavily involved in the financial side. He's very financially literate in terms of his market worth and value. And I'm sure after getting paid handsomely on pay-per-view for the past year or two, the Junior Farr fight was a pay-per-view in New Zealand, the UK-based pay-per-views for Derek Chisora, he's going to be asking for a certain sum. Maybe Matchroom right now, if they don't have any logical opponents, or maybe they feel that they can offer him something a bit lower and maybe he doesn't have other options. Could be a reason why he's reaching out to Ruiz. But let's face it, if he is going to get a Ruiz Jr. fight, he would have to go to PBC. It's just a reality. He's not going to be fighting Ruiz on, top rank. He's not going to be fighting Ruiz on DAZN in the United States. It would be with PBC. And if you're PBC, you're not going to bring this one guy in for one fight. You want to lock him up for a multi-fight deal. And I'm sure that's what Matchroom want to do, and potentially other suitors as well. They don't want to just have this one guy. And remembering as well, there had been talk from Tyson Fury and Joseph Parker that Parker could be out on Fury's undercard in a couple of months for his next fight. Could that happen? Well, potentially, but I'm sure Frank Warren would be in the same sort of boat. He would want to lock up Joseph Parker for more than one fight. I'm sure he would want to have a multi-fight deal, but is the money there? And let's face it, if Tyson Fury is facing Dillian Whyte, there's a $41 million purse for the main event. The undercard's not going to be good, so it's not going to be the sort of opponent that would want to see, so it's probably not going to be the sort of money that Parker wants. It's a reality. But it could be a stay busy, those sorts of developmental fights that Andy Lee's been talking about. But financially, it's probably not going to be the sort of money that Parker would want. I'm sure it's not going to be terrible, but it's not going to be those sort of headliner pay-per-view money type paydays. That's a reality. And Joseph Parker and his team have prioritized making money at every turn in his career. And they've been very successful at it. People forget, or people don't know, that Parker's been on pay-per-view in New Zealand since about his fourth or fifth fight. And it's been all the way through. Even all these ones that have been on DAZN, I've been having to reach into my pocket to pay pay-per-view $40 a pop or sometimes more. So there is that avenue that he brings that revenue to the table from New Zealand and sometimes the Australian market, depending on the size of the fight. The Ruiz fight back in 2016, that was $60 New Zealand dollars. But if he's really serious about a Ruiz fight, he's going to have to go to PBC. But does it make sense for Andy Ruiz Jr.? Remember, Joseph Parker's only got his name right now and some rankings. But similarly, Andy Ruiz, a former champion himself, former unified champion, he's got similarly good rankings pretty much across the board. Like Parker's got some good rankings. In the WBO, Joe Joyce is number one, Parker and Ruiz shortly thereafter. It's not going to be sort of, you'd need to have something on the line to really make this fight. And right now, neither has a title, does really, apart from money, does anything make sense? The only thing I can see, because I don't think the WBO is going to sort of sanction some sort of Ruiz Parker for a final eliminator for the WBO. It's more likely Joyce is going to get a final eliminator or just the mandatory. It's more likely, I think, if he was to fight Ruiz, it would have to be for an eliminator or final eliminator in the WBC. That's pretty much the only other place in the rankings where it makes sense, where you'd need something on the line to make it a bit more prestigious other than just money. But Parker, he's looking around obviously for options. What makes money is going to make sense. And this is why he's coming back to Andy Ruiz Jr. There's no Dillian Whyte, Anthony Joshua rematch. He's just fought Chisora. Who else can he fight in the Matchroom stable? It's a bit thin. Who can he fight in the Top Rank stable? He's not fighting Fury. There's no one else that he probably makes a big amount of money from. But there is interest in a Ruiz rematch. I'm sure there would be because it was close the first time. And Ruiz with his profile, Parker with his, that could make some decent money. And this is why he's pursuing that option. But the reality is he would need to sign with PBC for a multi-fight deal is my bet. They're not going to just let some guy come in for one fight. It doesn't make sense. But also for Ruiz, there is that talk that potentially Luis Ortiz or Deontay Wilder, it could be a situation where Joseph Parker's just not in the picture. It makes sense for Parker for all sorts of reasons, but the fact he's coming out on social media and calling for it, and if he really hasn't had much of an answer out of the Ruiz camp or PBC or whatever, then actually maybe he's kind of shouting into the wind here because he hasn't heard anything positive back. Maybe this is a negotiating tactic that Parker's trying to pull with Matchroom, trying to put out there he's got other options all the while looking to stay with Matchroom. Could be something like that. But if I was to hazard a guess, I'm not sure it happens. I like the fight. I like the rematch. Just don't think it's probably probable next. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.